Hi, I'm Bruce King, sports director of KOMO Television.
And I'm Bob Rondo with KOMO Radio, the home of the Huskies.
Since Husky football is such an integral part of our lives here in the Northwest, we thought it would be great to make available to every Husky fan a glimpse back as we celebrate the first 100 years of Husky football.
This, of course, coincides with the University of Washington's centennial celebration, and Bruce and I are proud to be a part of that.
So you can imagine the challenge we face trying to squeeze 100 years of great games and great names into one presentation. But quite frankly, it was a labor of love, going over some of the most exciting sports moments in the history of the entire Northwest. So time to get to it. Let's go back to the very beginning, to where the Husky football tradition was born.
The University of Washington in the early days was known as the Territorial University. But on November 11, 1889, the University of Washington was born. That, by the way, was the same day Washington became the 42nd state in the Union.
The football program started that same year with a ragtag team of tough individuals. Frank Griffiths was the first team captain of the Sun Dodgers, as they were known then. And they played their first game against an alumni team made up of men from Yale and Harvard. The alumni didn't have enough players for a game, so they imported some from the local athletic clubs. The game, played on a field at the Jackson Street Park, was won by the alumni 20-0.
In 1892, Billy Goodwin became Washington's first actual coach. And by 1893, the football program started to grow. Washington met Stanford for the first time. But most games were limited to local teams, such as the Tacoma Athletic Club and the Port Townsend Athletic Club and others. In 1895, the University of Washington was moved to its present campus, and the games were played on the old Denny Field.
Northwest rivalries first began with Oregon State in 1897. They soon followed in 1900 with games against Oregon and Washington State.
1902 also saw the organization of the NIAA, the National Intercollegiate Athletic Association, to promote and control college athletics in the Northwest. The rules of the NIAA, of which Washington was an original member, stated that a student needed to be taking at least 12 credit hours in school to be eligible to play football.
1903 saw Washington beat Nevada 2-0 in the first ever NIAA championship game. A field goal was worth 2 points in those days. Among the dignitaries attending that game was Seattle's own Chief Joseph. In 1908, Washington Athletic Director Bill Rasmussen hired Gilmore Doby as head coach for the exorbitant sum of $3,000 per year.
This began an incredible 9 years of Washington football. And a statistic for those years still stands today. From 1908 to 1916, the University of Washington won 58 games with no losses and only 3 ties.
Doby built his success with a simple offense based on the off-tackle slant. In those days, the forward pass was still quite rarely used. It was more a threat than a reliable weapon.
Wee Willie Coyle was an incredible quarterback on Doby's teams. Coyle quarterbacked Washington for 4 seasons without a loss. Regarding Doby, Coyle once said, "I was always scared of Doby. Actually, we all were. He was a big, tall, skinny guy. He was fair, but he was very particular about the way you played and about your attitude."
Doby was also famous for the Doby bunk play. Now, the head guards worn back in those days were just plain leather, like this one. And when held tucked in, they resembled a football. Well, during a 1911 game against Oregon, this play was conceived involving Bevan Presley, the center, Wee Willie Coyle, the quarterback, and Wayne Sutton, the end. Now, at the word hike, instead of snapping the ball to Coyle, Presley held on to the ball himself, and Coyle took his headgear off, tucked it under his arm, and made off for the sidelines. Well, in the meantime, Presley had handed off to Sutton, who then took the real football in for the score. Now, that play was tried only one more time before it was declared illegal. Gil Doby resigned in 1916, but no one has ever duplicated his winning seasons, ever. You can imagine the challenge Clyde Hunt went through following Doby's retirement. Ray Ekman, who was athletic director at the time, said, "The program at Washington was practically impossible for a coach. Washington fans were used to winning 9 years in a row with Doby. If a game was lost, it was, well, what's wrong?"
Coach Hunt went on to play one of the most lopsided games in school history, a 120-0 romp over Whitman, played on Denny Field. While missing from the record books, a kid by the name of Irvin Daly scored 7 touchdowns in that game. 7! Can you imagine?
In 1920, Babe Ruth signed with the New York Yankees, but in 1921, Enoch Bagshaw, affectionately known as Baggy, and who'd been a winning coach at Everett High School, began a 9-year term as the head coach. That was also when the Sun Dodgers became known as the Huskies. Baggy brought back the winning tradition to Washington.
Baggy was a very high-class guy, and very intense on everything, really too intense. We used to put molasses. We had leather pads on each side of the jersey. And Baggy thought it'd be a good idea to put molasses on each side so the kids wouldn't fumble the football. And that worked out pretty good until the officials found out about it, and they changed that.
Washington played USC for the first time in 1923, defeating them 22-0. And it was also the year that Baggy led his team to a 14-14 tie against Navy in Washington's first ever invitation to the Rose Bowl.
1925 saw Washington end the season in first place in the PCC with an invitation to meet Alabama in a classic, the 1926 Rose Bowl. That game featured the play of All-American George Wilson, one of the finest players ever to compete at Washington. The Huskies lost that dramatic Rose Bowl to Alabama 20-19. Baggy led the Huskies for 4 more seasons, and in 1928 developed another All-American halfback, Chuck Carroll.
Chuck Carroll was a great football player, and he was on a team that didn't have very much talent. And when we played Stanford, for example, to show what the opposition thought of him, after the game was over, the Stanford players picked up Chuck and carried him off the field because of going both ways. He's a terrific ball player.
Baggy's career ended in 1929 with a still impressive 9-year record of 63 wins, 22 losses, and 6 ties.
The 1930s saw the beginning of the Lone Ranger and the Jack Benny radio shows. The Aurora Bridge was completed, and Jimmy Phelan came to be the head coach of the Huskies. Coach Phelan had many successful years, developing star players such as All-American Paul Swegler in 1931. 1936 marked a cornerstone in Husky football. Phelan invited the Big Ten Minnesota Gophers to come and play Washington in Seattle. The Gophers were a huge, overpowering team, and the largest crowd in Husky history at that time jammed Husky Stadium to see the game, 37,000. While the Huskies lost 14-7, it established Washington as a program that could attract a major crowd if it brought in quality opponents.
That season, which was quite successful, ended with a dramatic victory over Washington State and a trip to the Rose Bowl. After beating the Cougars 40-0, Pittsburgh defeated the Huskies 21-0 in Pasadena.
The 1940s, a time of war, a time when a new car sold for $695. The Tacoma Narrows Bridge collapsed. The Grand Coulee Dam was completed, and Coach Ralph Welch came to Washington. From 1942 to 1947, the Huskies played mostly service teams in a Northern Division, Southern Division format. Washington earned a trip to the Rose Bowl in 1943, but lost to Southern Division champ Southern Cal 29-0. Ralph Welch ended his 6-year career with a 27-20-3 mark.
The late 1940s saw the beginning of seafair and the hydroplane races on Lake Washington, and a new coach for the Huskies, Howie Odell, fresh from the fields of Yale University. Odell was coach of the Huskies through 1952, and while his teams went only 23-25-2, his 1950 and 1952 teams are recognized as 2 of the best offensive teams in Washington history, and for 2 All-American reasons. In 1949, Hurricane Hugh McElhaney was recruited to Washington. Also known as the King, Hugh is the premier running back in the history of Washington football.
Hugh was the greatest running back I've ever seen. That includes Red Grange and Gale Sayers. At that time, we didn't have many outsiders. And the local kids kind of thought, well, here's a big name from the outsider kind of come in, take it over, and we don't know whether we like it or not, you know. So we practiced in the same place back of the swimming pool, or that area where they had gravel along here. And he'll come around the outside, and he was tackled, pretty well tackled. And he could see the kid sliding into the gravel, reached down and picked up his headgear so his face wouldn't get cut. And from then on, he never had any trouble with football there.
What can you say about the king that hasn't been said? The best running back I've ever seen. And I'm talking 46 years of football in some capacity or other. In the years that I was in the pros, playing and coaching, over 23 years in that combination. And there are people that, to this day, I'm not beyond Washington fans that saw him. But when Papa George Bear Hallis told me that, or told the world, that he was the best running back that he had seen. So there are a lot of records that have come and gone. And he didn't get maybe the exposure that he would have gotten had he been in a metropolitan area playing in San Francisco, but his yards per carry at the University of Washington College, his pro career, I just cannot say enough things about what a great football player and athlete that Hugh McElhaney was.
I was a type of runner that I could change direction very quickly, running at top speed. That was probably my greatest asset as a runner. I don't know what got into me. I think we were down 14-0, and why I did it, I have no idea. I just went and caught the ball, and I knew where I was. In the corner of my eye, Howie O'Dell knew what I was doing, and I could see him, no. And a couple of good blocks sprung me in, and Frank Gifford had the last shot at me, and he punted the ball. He had the last shot at me, and he missed me.
Don Heinrich was the All-American quarterback then, and both Don and Hugh set many NCAA rushing and passing records. The 1950 game against California is still one of the most talked about games in Washington history.
They had only thrown the ball 4 times up until that game. So the strategy defensively was basically we played 11-man line. Everybody was up on the line. They threw 4 passes in that game. 2 of them were for touchdowns, and that was the difference in breaking the back, breaking our back. And if I remember correctly, we moved the ball readily against them, but we just couldn't put it in. There was a big controversy about Heine throwing the ball on the 1-yard line. Hell, it was a great call. Tracy King got tripped, knocked down. He would have been wide open. Hey, that's the way the game plays. Heine was a gambler, you know. He wasn't afraid. He'd try anything, and I never looked at that as, a lot of people have been critical of it, but I never saw it that way. That was just a shot. You go for it. If it worked, great.
Another game lingering in the memory of Husky fans is a game against Washington State, also in 1950. Now, the Huskies were ahead by a comfortable margin toward the end of the game when it was discovered that Don Heinrich needed only 1 more completion to break the single-season national record. Now, the Cougars were threatening to score, and the message was sent into the huddle: let Washington State score so that Heinrich could get a final shot at breaking the record.
We had just scored a touchdown. In order to get the ball back, they told the kickoff coverage team to let the other team score. So we got the ball back. They put me in the game, and I didn't think a whole lot about it, but I throw a little swing pass to McElhaney. Figure, you know, that's the thing to do, and pick up a little short yardage, get the play over, and get out of there. We're not trying to run up the score on them. Well, maybe a little bit. And Hugh takes off on like an 80-yarder or whatever. You know, he zips down the sideline, and you know, they think we're laying it on them. And as I look back on it, they deserved it.
The popular game show, What's My Line, also started in 1950, and the new Husky Stadium was finished, complete with a cantilevered roof. The fans weren't too sure about it at first, since the roof seemed to be unsupported.
Howie O'Dell resigned in 1952 and was replaced by the popular and successful freshman coach and former Husky standout John Sherberg. Milt Bohart and Sandy Letterman were chosen All-American under Sherberg's tutelage, and after his 3-year term as head coach, the people's choice, Johnny Sherberg, was elected Lieutenant Governor of Washington State, a post he held until January of 1989.
The outgoing Sherberg was replaced by Darrell Royal, who was given a $17,000 a year salary for his services, one of the highest salaries in the country at that time. Royal worked to build a foundation for the future at Washington, but in late 1956, the University of Texas made Royal an offer he couldn't refuse, and Darrell Royal ended his one-year stay with the Huskies. The late 50s saw Disneyland open. The Frisbee was introduced, as was the Boeing 707. And this man came to town. 1957 began a new era in Husky football as Jim Owens became head coach. Owens was an assistant coach under Alabama's Bear Bryant. An All-American at Oklahoma, Jim Owens' philosophy was simple: out-condition and out-hit the opponent.
We did a lot more conditioning than it had been done because we just felt like that was going to be an edge for us. And while we didn't have a championship team in 57 or 58, we were building that. We wanted them to be just as aggressive and as quick and mean. We talked about that all the time because we couldn't overpower anyone. And you were playing both ways. And at that time, you could a changeover because of some real aggressive play, 2 or 3 people being in on the play, maybe somebody will knock the ball loose. That's certainly no different than what's done today, but we emphasized it a great deal, and it did make a lot of big plays for us. Our players were very aggressive, or they didn't start, or they didn't get to play very much. They had to be really aggressive, and they were.
But something happened in 1959. It all started to click, and what a year it was.
We were just trying to survive going into our junior year, and we were ranked, I think, to come in last in the league, but I don't think anyone felt that we were going to be last. I don't think anyone really had delusions that we were going to be first. We were just trying to survive and get the kids on the field and play football, and so illusions at that time was more of survival than of winning or losing.
Washington, with what they call their swing tee, unbalanced to the right-hand side, end and halfback split. The ball is down on the Idaho 25. No score in the ball game. 11:29 left to play in the first quarter. There's your swing. Touchdown. 3rd and 10 for Utah on the white shirts. Their end split. The rollout for Knopfsinger. Intercepted. Myers. 2nd and 14 on the Husky 29-yard line in the second period. Washington leading 21-6. The end is blank. He has plenty of time. Beautiful run. Billy Howard and Mont Bailey put the stop on Don Makita. 52-yard play. 19 yards on the last play. This drive started on the 50. They've run 4 plays. Here's Fleming. With some excellent blocking down to the 5-yard line. End and halfback flank to the left-hand side for the Huskies. And that's Fleming in motion. Here's the reverse. Florette looking, firing down there. There's the looper pass. It is good. Complete to the 41-yard line to Fulkins. The looper pass. 3 out of 15 in the pass department for the Huskies. They take over 1st and 10 on their own 33-yard line. Here's Florette. He's looking for the big one. There's the alley-ooper down there. That's Makita. 28-yard line. Sanchez made the tackle on him. 2 for 5 in the pass department. End and halfback flank. Fleming in motion. Here's Surratt. Out of bounds at the Cougar 33-yard line, driven out by Harper.
After a convincing 20-0 win over Washington State, the Huskies were Rose Bowl bound. An amazing time. History, Husky hysteria was at its peak.
Big Jim gets the big ride for the final time this season.
Have you guys discussed the Rose Bowl much or at all? Well, it's always back in some of the guys' mind, but we wanted to beat the Cougars, and we had this game in mind, and we played it one at a time. And Rose Bowl's good right now after the game, but before the game was all Cougars. Right. Don and Bob, congratulations. Thank you very much. Terrific game. You're a bunch of All-Americans, a whole bunch of you as far as we're concerned. Thank you very much.
I don't believe I've ever felt this good in my life. We've had some real fortunate things happen to me, but nothing like today.
We were like a bunch of country kids going to the big city, and it was Cinderella time. And we got down there, and we were just happy to be there. And of course, we were made underdogs immediately by the Big Ten by 14 points or something like that again.
How do you measure it? I mean, it's a fantasy that you just don't think is ever possible. And all of a sudden, it's right in front of us. We had the reality of it.
Let's look at a bit of that history-making game against Wisconsin in the 1960 Rose Bowl.
The Washington Huskies come onto the field, led by their mascot. What a game these young men are about to record for Rose Bowl history, and in a convincing manner.
First quarter action saw Washington take advantage of its quickness over Wisconsin. Slorette was to become the co-player of the game. Washington was the first to score, with Makita going over the right side. George Fleming added 3 more points with his 35-yard field goal to make the score 10-0 Washington. The last play of the first quarter, Fleming dazzles over 105,000 with his 53-yard punt return for a Husky touchdown. Fans still talk about this touchdown catch by Lee Falcon. Late in the third quarter, the Huskies threaten again. It's Jackson into the end zone, which gives the Huskies a 30-8 lead over Wisconsin. In the fourth quarter, Slorette goes back to pass. He finds Fleming open. The play covers 65 yards. On the next play, Slorette gives you some idea of how tough a runner he really is. On the very next play, Bob Slorette keeps and scores. A stunned crowd watches as Washington wraps up the win in the Rose Bowl. The final, the Huskies 44, Wisconsin 8. That convincing Rose Bowl victory earned the Huskies a #2 ranking in the country by UPI and Associated Press, and a #1 ranking by the Helms Foundation, the only Husky team to be voted #1 after a season. The early 1960s saw the opening of the Century 21 Exposition and World's Fair, and Roger Maris broke Babe Ruth's home run record.
For the Huskies, the 1960 regular season was as tough as the '59 season was surprising. Now, Washington couldn't sneak up on anyone now.
There were many injuries to the line in 1960, as well as a broken collarbone suffered by all-star quarterback Bob Slorette. But despite the injuries, Washington finishes the season with a 9-1 record, losing only a thriller to Navy, 15-14. 2 particular plays marked the 1960 season, and they both involved Don Makita. Trailing 6-0 against the University of Oregon, Makita, the former Marine, outplays his defender and scores this game-winning touchdown.
First down, gets away, still going. It's a touchdown, it's a touchdown, it's a touchdown. Oh, and back around Makita on the sidelines, got away from Dave Grayson and went in standing up.
You know, I was so elusive and so fast, it just made, I still am amazed in what I've been able to accomplish. But what happened was, I came out of the backfield, ran an out pattern, and I think the time was running down to 2 minutes and something. And Grayson, who is an outstanding defensive back, realized I had caught the ball, and he starts swearing. And I thought, well, geez, I really must have him beat pretty bad. I'll turn the corner and go. Well, you know, I mean, he would run 100 faster than I ran a 50. and all of a sudden I was in the end zone, and that's the first time playing football that I really heard the fans.
One of the all-time great Husky Cougar games took place that year in Spokane. A come-from-behind victory with the Huskies 8-7 to earn Washington a second straight trip to Pasadena.
This could be a Jorgensen touchdown. Touchdown for the Huskies. Huskies are going for two. Bob Heidner sets. Throws. Makita, he's got it.
The Huskies were invited back to the Rose Bowl after the 1960 season to face Minnesota.
Washington was facing an extremely rugged and strong Minnesota Gopher football team. The Huskies were the first to get on the board with an incredible 44-yard field goal by George Fleming.
In those days, not too many 40-yard field goals or anything like that were being kicked around, and particularly in the Big Ten and so forth. And I remembered Merriam Warmath, who was the coach at that time, when we played with him over in the Hula Bowl later, he was saying that my record field goal kick that was sort of the turning point of the game, because when we lined up for the field goal, many of the players on their side was laughing and, and this kind of thing there, and didn't think that I, could kick the field goal. So I remember that one.
Ray Jackson was again the muscle man up the middle. Second quarter, Surratt enters the game at quarterback and throws to Brent Wooten for the game's first touchdown. One key to the football game was on 3rd and 1. Bob Surratt hoped to just get the first down. Instead, he gets this long gainer. On that same drive, Surratt scores the final touchdown of the day as the Huskies go on to defeat Minnesota 17-7. Helping to seal the win was then sophomore Charlie Mitchell, who came up with his critical interception and long run.
I had a nice defensive play, a couple, knocking the ball down a long pass and then intercepting one for a fairly long run. But I just think the excitement built up to that Rose Bowl. It's just something unbelievable and something that you always cherish.
With that Rose Bowl victory, the Huskies completed their second consecutive 10-1 season, missing the national title by only 1 point.
1961 was disappointing. The Huskies went 5-4-1. In 1962, the record was better, 7-1-2. But Washington did not return to the Rose Bowl until after the 1963 season. Despite going 6-4, the Huskies made it by beating such powers as USC.
The SC game was a big game for us because they were national champions the year before. That was our only loss the year before. And when they came up here, we knew we had to beat them. And we played a great game that day and won the game. And we felt then that we should make it to the Rose Bowl.
The Rose Bowl featured Washington against a strong Illinois team. And the Huskies were defeated 17-7 after Husky quarterback Bill Douglas went down with a knee injury.
When I felt it go, it was a dislocation, and I knew I was done, and I was pretty disappointed because at that point the game was going pretty well, and this is what you play all your life for, to play in the Rose Bowl, and it didn't last very long.
The most disappointing thing was through the first series of downs when we had the ball and Bill was at the helm, we were having a lot of success, and he was in a groove, and he looked like he was going to have a great day, and that built a lot of confidence. And when Bill went down, we were obviously hopeful that the next quarterback that came in would be able to do the job.
Illinois had a very good ball club. They were much better than either Minnesota or Wisconsin that we'd played earlier. And when you have fellows like Butkus and those kind of fellows, you've got your work cut out for you. You need everybody healthy, and still a good ball game. And it's, you can guess and guess and guess, but with Coffey and Bill Douglas in there, there's no doubt in my mind that it would have been a different outcome, because our club that year was equally as strong in depth and personnel and everything as our 59-60 clubs, and I'm fully convinced of that. We'd had another victory.
The mid-60s saw Jim Ryan set a record in the mile run. Cassius Clay became the heavyweight champion of the world. The Beatles made their first visit to the States, and changes were made in collegiate football which allowed 2 platoon football substitutions. Jim Owens' advantage of conditioning and outlasting the other teams in the fourth quarter was gone.
I think we were a little slower to accept the fact that the two platoon was really here to stay. It was voted in, and we continued to recruit players that could play both ways. We started obviously playing them on their best side, either offense or defense, but we didn't have quite the specialists that some of the other clubs had, and this was a factor in our program. We tried to do best we could, but we didn't have those great years then that we'd had before.
Man Walked on the Moon in 1969. The film Easy Rider premiered, and the Woodstock Music and Arts Festival was held in New York. 1969 also became a season when football programs all over the nation were in upheaval because of the racial tensions which demanded change in our society. But in 1970, things changed at Washington as this man came on the scene.
Sonny Sixkiller made his debut as the Husky quarterback, and all of a sudden the forward pass became a huge offensive weapon. Sonny's quick hands and explosive arm made people stand up and take notice. Why, Sonny even made the cover of Sports Illustrated.
Sports Illustrated was my junior year in Boys Life and a lot of other magazines, and it was, to be honest with you, I didn't want to be on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Our sports information director thought it'd be a great idea. I didn't want to be on it. I just didn't think it was right for me to be on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Unfortunately, the day I told him I didn't want to be on it, the guy was sitting in the stands watching practice, so I didn't have, I mean, I was there. I was nailed into this thing.
The 1971 Purdue game stands out in my mind as one of Sonny's greatest shows.
Sonny finished the day with a career in school record 387 yards passing as the Huskies defeat Purdue 38-35. Sonny finished his career with 5,496 yards passing, still the best Washington has ever seen.
The Huskies had a successful season in 1972 with a record of 8-3. But in 1973, things started to go downhill as Washington went 2-9 and then 5-5 in 1974. So after 18 years, Jim Owens retired from coaching.
I really felt that it was time that I personally decided to do something different, and felt like it was probably the best for the program. A new coach, new blood, and had enjoyed all 18 years very, very much.
The mid-1970s saw construction begin on the Kingdome, and the Mariners and the Seahawks come to town. 1975 also brings a new head coach to Washington. Don James arrives from Kent State. Don James' first 2 years, 1975 and 1976, were building years, instituting Don's philosophy of a disciplined offense, a rock-solid defense, and well-drilled special teams.
The concept of an overall football program was in pretty good shape. We had an academic counseling system set up. We had recruiting coordinators and the coaching numbers. So we were okay. The squad had some vacancies. We had a good senior class. We had a lot of seniors. We had about 40 seniors. And then there were a couple of lean years in there. So we had some void areas in the recruiting process.
Well, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty. Probably less for me as a freshman than some of the guys that were juniors and seniors, but it was a pretty talented group that were juniors and seniors. So I guess one of the things Coach Owens wanted to do was leave a team for the next guy that was competitive. And what we had heard was that he was kind of waiting until the team was competitive, and then he was going to give it over to somebody else. And when Don came in, there was some talent there.
In his first 2 years, one game will be best remembered. The 1975 cliffhanger against Washington State. First-year quarterback Warren Moon threw a prayer late in the game, which was bobbled twice by the Cougars and fell into the hands of Spider Gaines, who runs it in for a touchdown. The Huskies win it 28-27, and Warren Moon would become one of Washington's all-time great quarterbacks.
Well, we had recruited Warren out of junior college. He had spent 1 year in a junior college situation. He had decided to go out, and his coach agreed to let him be recruited. So we brought him in, and he won the job. And it was a struggle. We were not a great football team, but you know, he did a good job. And the thing about Warren is he had tremendous work ethic, and you could see him getting better from his first game to his last game.
I liked Warren a lot and was able to go through 3 years with him. And Warren never ceased to amaze me of how he was able to keep a focus on something. There was a lot of distractions around Warren. With Chris rolling around early in his career, and then how we started that senior year. And Warren had an ability to just focus on what he needed to do, and that's a great ability.
1977 started out horribly. Early losses to lesser teams made fans and players question this Husky team. But prior to the first conference game against Oregon, things changed.
I think you almost have to go back to the personality of the team. And there were some real individualistic, kind of crazy, wild people on that team. And we were all pulling in different directions, including, I think, the coaching staff was trying to adjust to how to work with a bunch of people like that. And I think at some point, and I can't tell who or why or what happened specifically, but it was almost like everybody said, hey, you know, what the heck are we doing here? You know, we got a chance to do something. Let's go try to do it.
The Huskies proceeded to bury Oregon and then defeat USC, California, and others, finishing the year 7-4 on the field and 9-2 officially due to 2 forfeits. Washington's victory over the Cougars on a frozen field sent the Huskies to Pasadena for a date with Michigan.
No, we needed to win the WSU game. We had to have that victory, and I will never forget the game. Our players were so intent on winning it that they went out and scored the first 3 times and wanted to get it out of reach as fast as they can.
Much like the 1960 Rose Bowl, where Washington faced a highly favored Wisconsin team, the Huskies met Michigan, a prohibitive favorite.
On Washington's opening drive, the Huskies moving. Warren Moon found Spider Gaines inside the 10-yard line. The first touchdown came as Moon rolled to the left, ran it in for the score. Washington leads it 7-0 over Michigan. The Huskies knew they had to be more aggressive than Michigan, and Jeff Leland typified that attitude with his solid hits. The surprising Huskies threw another twist at the Wolverines when Spider Gaines runs this reverse for 31 yards to give the Huskies a 17-0 lead. Keeping Michigan totally off balance, the Huskies faked a punt late in the second quarter. Kyle Stevens will take it all the way to the Michigan 20-yard line. In the second half, the Huskies began an incredible drive, starting on their own 3. Joe Steele, playing hurt, came up with this outstanding effort. The drive was capped with the game's eventual MVP, Warren Moon, throwing 28 yards to Spider Gaines for the touchdown. The score, 24-7 Washington. But the play everyone remembers most was late in the fourth quarter when linebacker Michael Jackson stole this Michigan pass to stop a touchdown drive. The icer came late when Michigan's Rick Leach threw deep, but was intercepted by Nesby Glasgow. The final score, Washington 27, Michigan 20. Warren Moon was named the most valuable player of the game, passing for 234 yards, 1 touchdown, and rushing for another.
This is the greatest way to close it out. Every goal I set for myself at the beginning of the year has been accomplished, and I think we've proved to the rest of the nation now that the Huskies can play nationally ranked football.
That's the kind of game a Rose Bowl should be. It ought to be one of those games where everything is decided in the last couple seconds, and in that game it was. I mean, the last 2 great plays by Nesby and Michael Jackson were what saved the game, and they were down there well inside the 20-yard line.
In 1979, the Seattle Supersonics won the national championship, and the Huskies tallied a 9-2 season and met Texas in the Sun Bowl. But during that 1979 season, Joe Steele did something special during the first game against Wyoming. Joe broke the legendary Hugh McElhaney's career rushing record of 2,499 yards.
He came in the locker room and congratulated me, and I was given the ball that I broke the record with, and it was a nice little deal.
December 22nd, 1979, saw a showdown between 13th-ranked Washington and 6th-ranked Texas in the Sun Bowl, with the Longhorns favored by 7 points.
I do remember vividly the fact that Texas actually looked down upon us. The teams, the fans, we were like second-class people. We're from the Northwest. We didn't really know how to play football. And we got that feeling very early on when we arrived in Texas, and didn't really appreciate the attitude, and played a real good football game.
Washington did all their scoring in the second quarter. Freshman receiver Paul Scansey, who made 5 receptions that day, caught Tom Flick's 18-yard pass for the first touchdown of the game. Next, Texas native freshman tailback Willis Ray Mackey scores from 4 yards out, making it 14-0 in favor of the Huskies. The second half was a bitter struggle, with the game coming down to Texas's final possession. 14-7 Washington, 3 minutes remaining. The Husky defense shut down the Longhorns on 4 straight downs, earning the Huskies the Sun Bowl title.
The 1980s, a new decade, and the beginning of 9 straight bowl appearances by the Huskies. They won the Pac-10 title in 1980 with a 9-3 record. Willie Roseborough, Chuck Nelson, Aaron Williams, Ray Horton, Tom Flick, and Anthony Allen, among others, provided some exciting highlights.
Chuck Nelson booted this 25-yard field goal at the ending gun to nip Stanford and keep the Huskies in the Pac-10 race. Ray Horton against Southern California shows why he's one of Washington's greatest returners. Early in the third quarter, tied at 3, Ray Horton breaks the 73-yarder for a Washington touchdown. Still in the third quarter, Flick finds Paul Scansey for the score. Washington eventually knocked off SC 20-10. Needing only a victory over Washington State to go to the Rose Bowl. In the last game of the year, Flick threw 41 yards to Aaron Williams, sending Washington to the 1981 Rose Bowl game.
January 1st, 1981. 16th-ranked Washington met 5th-ranked Michigan in the Rose Bowl. Again, the Huskies were underdogs, but they could not pull off the upset like they did in 1978.
1981 was a successful season for the Huskies, going 9-2, winding up once again in the Rose Bowl, this time facing Iowa.
Heading into the California game, the Huskies had a 3-1 record, but they were still hurting from a 26-7 loss to Arizona State. Fourth quarter, trailing by 6, Cookie Jackson springs open for 41 yards, setting up the game-winning touchdown. From there, tailback Sterling Hines runs it in for 6, and the point after kept Washington in the Rose Bowl race. Three weeks later, with a 6-1 record, Washington's Anthony Allen scrambles 71 yards on this punt return for a Husky touchdown, the 9th longest in Washington history. Allen also finished 5th among all Huskies in career pass receptions.
Then came the showdown between Washington and Washington State in the annual Apple Cup game. The winner of this 74th meeting between the two clubs would be going to the Rose Bowl.
I believe that's the only time in recent history that both Washington schools could have gone to the Rose Bowl with a victory, and that is exciting to get into a game like that. It's obviously big because it's the traditional rival, but to have the Rose Bowl on the line was something special.
Possibly the most memorable play was at the end of the first half. Paul Scansey pulls in this touchdown pass from Steve Pallure.
It was a catch that, you know, was something right before the half, kind of a momentum breaker or a momentum builder in our case, and it was a memorable catch.
The icer came when Cookie Jackson scored in the second half, making the final Washington 23, Washington State 10. On to Pasadena in 1982. The underdog Huskies ignored the odds and went on to record the first Rose Bowl shutout in 28 years. It was an impressive game and introduced the world to newcomer Jock Robinson, who went on to become the most valuable player of the 1982 Rose Bowl game.
playing a little bit early in this season as a freshman, true freshman, and he was injured in the Oregon game and missed a lot of play. And we just kind of assumed that he was done and gone for the season. But he came back and gave us a great look against SC. And he looked, as I came off the field, I said, you know, the guy down there playing Marcus Allen is looking better than our varsity running back. So I said, we've got to bring him up and give him a chance and work him in. And a few weeks later, he was MVP in the Rose Bowl.
Washington and Iowa battled to a scoreless tie after the first quarter, but not without a Husky threat. Cornerback Ray Horton returns this Iowa punt 48 yards to the Hawkeye 29. In the second quarter, eventual MVP Jock Robinson bowls over to score from the 1 to cap a 65-yard drive. 34 yards of it belonged to Jock Robinson. Leading 13-0 in the third quarter, Iowa made its deepest penetration to the Husky 29. But that drive is stopped when Kenny Driscoll intercepts this Hawkeye pass. The fourth quarter belonged to Jock Robinson, running for 66 yards on 3 carries, including this good 34-yard run, giving the Huskies a 21-0 lead. The day was capped off with this Tim Cowan quarterback reverse, making the final score Washington 28, Iowa nothing, and making this the first Rose Bowl shutout in 28 years.
1982, Washington was undefeated and ranked #1 in the country before losing to Stanford in Palo Alto. Paul Scanzi, however, went on to set a school record in career receptions with 138, and Jock Robinson recorded 203 yards rushing against Texas Tech.
Still in the Rose Bowl race with an 8-1 record, Washington's Aaron Williams makes an incredible one-handed catch against Arizona State. This score led to a 17-13 Washington victory, knocking Arizona State out of the Rose Bowl race. Finishing second in the Pac-10 with a 9-2 record, the Huskies earned a trip to Honolulu and the Aloha Bowl. When the Huskies took over on their own 20 with 3:49 to play after the missed Maryland field goal and Tim Cowan hit Anthony Allen for 16 yards, the crowd came alive and you could sense it would be a dramatic finish. It was the kind of action that has you sitting on the edge of your seat, with Tim Cowan converting on 3 fourth downs during the drive. This time, he keeps the drive alive by running for a first down as the tension builds. Then on 2nd and 3 at the 11, 6 seconds to play, the Huskies come up with the play of the game as Cowan throws into the corner of the end zone to a diving Anthony Allen for the tying touchdown on a play that Allen suggested the Huskies call. But with the score tied, there was an anxious moment when the pass from center for the extra point was low. But Chuck Nelson wasn't worried.
I just wanted to make sure and get it in the air. And once I hit it, I knew it was gone. I knew it was up. And an extra point, you got to hit really badly to miss. And I didn't hit it that badly.
1983 was another solid season. The Huskies went 8-4 and earned a return trip to the Aloha Bowl.
One of the most exciting games of the 1983 regular season was against Michigan. Trailing late in the fourth quarter, quarterback Steve Pallure finds Danny Green to set up the winning touchdown. Pallure then lobs this pass deep into the corner of the end zone, where Mark Patterson makes the catch and brings Washington to within 1 of the Wolverines. The Huskies go for 2 and the win. Pallure rolls to his right. He finds tight end Larry Michael. It's complete. Washington knocks off Michigan 25-24 in a thriller. With the Pac-10 race heating up, the Huskies' Bestie Jackson helps give Washington a 23-22 win at Arizona with a 66-yard interception and touchdown run. That put Washington into a game with USC the following week, where the Huskies shut out the Southern California Trojans 24-0. Pac-10 Offensive Player of the Year, Steve Pallure, found Danny Green for this 39-yard touchdown play. For the second year in a row, the Huskies spend Christmas in Hawaii. Washington gained the early lead in the second quarter when Danny Green takes the ball on his own 43 and runs 57 yards for the touchdown. The Huskies increased their lead to 10-3 late in the second quarter on this 39-yard field goal by Jeff Jaeger. But they couldn't hold on in the second half, and Penn State went on to win it 13-10.
1984 was one of the classic years for the Dogs, finishing the regular season at 10-1. This team was noted for the Purple Rain defense, perhaps the finest in Husky history.
We knew it would be a special year when the Huskies knocked off the Wolverines at Michigan. Hugh Millen, in his second start, throwing to high school teammate Mark Patterson for a 73-yard touchdown. The final, Washington 20, Michigan 11. Three-year letterman Joe Kelly made this 40-yard interception look easy against the Stanford Cardinal. Washington was deep at quarterback. Paul Sicaro in his first start connects with Danny Green for this touchdown against the California Bears, and oh, what a catch it was. All-American Ronnie Holmes was the anchor of the Purple Rain defense, and you can see why.
After a comeback win over Washington State, the Huskies went on to become the first Pac-10 team ever to compete in and win the Orange Bowl. The foe, the Oklahoma Sooners. And what a game it turned out to be.
Again, Washington, considered the underdog, showed Oklahoma what a passing attack is all about. Sicaro to Danny Green for 29 yards and a touchdown in the first quarter. Still in the first quarter, Washington set up its next touchdown when Jock Robinson ran 14 yards to the Sooner 1. From there, the offensive game's MVP gave Washington a 14-0 lead. In the fourth quarter, the Huskies went to work again, starting with Hugh Millen to Patterson for 12 yards and a Washington touchdown. Then the Huskies bust the game wide open as Joe Kelly picks off this deflected pass. From there, fullback Rick Fenny runs 6 yards for the final touchdown, making the final score 28-17 Washington.
The schools back there aren't used to the professional, the NFL type of throwing teams, which we had. We had the great receivers coming into the game, and then it was a question of if we could beat the wishbone. And of course, once you get ahead in the wishbone, they have to start throwing. So we knew we had to stop them right away. And they had all the stars and all the big mouths, and it was a very satisfying win. A great way to finish my career.
Washington gained a final ranking of second in the nation. There's not a Husky fan alive who didn't think that '84 squad should have been number 1.
In 1985, the Huskies came within 2 one-point losses of being in the Rose Bowl again.
The Huskies opened conference play in 1985 against UCLA. Trailing the entire first half, Hugh Millen hits Mo Hill with no time remaining in the half, and the Huskies go for 2, cutting the Bruin lead to 14-11. Then Jeff Jaeger ties the game in the third quarter at 14-all with his 37-yard field goal. Then with 2 minutes remaining in the game, the Huskies leading 21-14, the veteran Joe Kelly closes the door with this interception. The final 4 minutes of the game against USC will be remembered for the next 100 years. 98 yards away, Chris Chandler, in his first start at quarterback, completed 6 passes to beat the Trojans 20-17. First, he completed 2 straight to Mo Hill, this one on 4th down to keep the drive alive. Next, Chandler found David Trimble for 21 yards and a first down. After an 11-yard completion to Hill, Chandler hits tight end Rod Jones for 9 more yards. Then with 56 seconds remaining, Chandler finds Hill for the winning touchdown, 98 yards in 4 minutes. The Huskies win it 20-17.
On December 30th, 1985, the Huskies met Colorado in the second annual Freedom Bowl in Anaheim. Sophomore quarterback Chris Chandler passed for 141 yards. He ran for 72 more as the Huskies defeated the Buffaloes 20-17.
The 1986 season started out with a bang as the Huskies beat the 10th-ranked Ohio State Buckeyes. No, they didn't beat them, they destroyed them. The final was 40-7.
The Husky defense forced 6 Ohio State turnovers and a blocked punt, which led to 24 Washington points in the first half. Leading 17-0 in the second quarter, Chandler throws to Lonzel Hill for 45 yards to the Buckeye 11. 2 plays later, Chandler goes to Hill again, this time a 5-yard touchdown pass, making it 24-0 at the intermission. In the third quarter, Tim Peoples blocks the 4th punt of his career as Tony Zachary recovers the football for the Washington touchdown. And finally in the fourth quarter, Chandler goes to his old friend Mo Hill for a 31-yard touchdown pass. One of the Huskies' biggest road wins came in Palo Alto against the Stanford Cardinal. Washington took the lead in the second quarter when Chandler threw to Rick Fenny on the 6-yard touchdown play, and this tied the score at 7-all. The second half belonged to Washington. The Huskies' deep threat, Mo Hill, runs 42 yards for this go-ahead touchdown. And Fenney iced the game on this 9-yard run. The final, 24-14, Washington. Going into the Cougar game, the Huskies needed a win to have a shot at a major bowl. Two Huskies in particular had great games. Brian Slater caught touchdown passes of 25, 38, and 25 yards as Washington gets the win, 44-23. A great moment came with 2.5 minutes left. Jeff Jager kicks this 27-yard field goal, his third of the day, to set an NCAA career record of 80 field goals.
Don James recorded his 100th victory as a head coach on November 8, 1986, with a win over the Oregon State Beavers in Corvallis. Now, the Huskies closed out the year with a trip to the Sun Bowl against lightning-quick Alabama, but the Crimson Tide won it 28-6. In 1987, Washington put together a 7-4-1 season, earned a trip to the Independence Bowl. They defeated Tulane 24-12.
A new era began in 1987 with the completion of the new upper deck, and the Huskies had quite a housewarming, knocking off Stanford 32-21. One highlight was Chris Chandler's 45-yard touchdown pass to Darrell Franklin in the third quarter. Another 1987 highlight came against Arizona State, as the Husky defense held the defending Pac-10 champions to only 14 points. Bo Yates scored on this interception on the second play of the game. Washington finished with 2 interceptions, 12 deflections, 6 quarterback sacks, and 7 tackles for a loss as the Huskies defeat Arizona State 27-14. In the 9th game of the year at Arizona, a new quarterback. Kerry Conklin came in for the injured Chris Chandler and threw 2 touchdown passes as the Huskies battled the Wildcats to a 21-21 tie. With the Independence Bowl bid at hand, Washington hosted the Cougars in the 80th annual Apple Cup game. DeMoy Williams set the tone with a 63-yard punt return in the first quarter. Leading 14-13 at the end of the third quarter, the Huskies ran up 3 touchdowns. Aaron Jenkins on this 31-yard run. On defense, Eugene Burkhalter stole this Tim Rosenbaugh pass and runs it 30 yards for a Washington touchdown. And the eventual number 2 all-time rusher, Vince Weathersby, scores from 6 yards out. The final, the Huskies 34, Washington State 19. The Independence Bowl in Shreveport, Louisiana was Chris Chandler's final game as a Husky. And Chris completed 15 of 30 passes for 234 yards to lead the Huskies past Tulane 24-12.
In 1988, the Huskies again posted a winning season with a 6-5 record. But it wasn't good enough for a bowl bid, and Washington's 9-year bowl streak came to an end. But in 1989, a new string began. With a new wide-open offense and a new fast, aggressive defense, Washington ran through the 1989 regular season with a renewed enthusiasm and determination.
Washington's comeback win against UCLA in 1989 was extra special because it was played in Pasadena, the home of the Rose Bowl. 4 plays later, 4th down, Conklin again finds Bailey, this time for 7 yards and a Washington first down. Just over a minute remaining, Greg Lewis from the 10 runs the delay. He goes to his left, scores the game-tying touchdown. The point after was good. The Huskies knock off UCLA 28-27. The 1989 Apple Cup was supposed to be a wide-open, high-scoring affair. And on the first play from scrimmage, Husky rover Eric Briscoe picks off this pass and rambles 35 yards for a Washington touchdown. With 8 seconds remaining in the third quarter, Greg Lewis scores Washington's other touchdown in a 20-9 win over the Cougars as the Huskies finish the regular season at 7-4 and earn a date with Florida in the Freedom Bowl. Some called the Florida-Washington matchup the best of any bowl game in 1989. It was expected to be a close, high-scoring affair. In the first quarter, Kerry Conklin throws to Mario Bailey for a 21-yard scoring strike, giving the Huskies a 7-0 lead. Andre Riley joined the party with his 10-yard reception and touchdown, making it 17-7 Huskies late in the first quarter. In the second quarter, a great effort for the Huskies. Number 39, Chico Fraley, blocks this Florida punt. And Jaime Fields lands on the loose football. That made it 24-7, Washington. Finally, a look into the future. Mark Brunell in at quarterback. Late in the fourth quarter, he scrambles 20 yards for the final touchdown of the game. The Huskies defeat Florida 34-7. Another string of bowl games begins for Washington football.
We're proud and thankful to all Huskies, past and present, for giving us so much excitement. I'm only sorry we didn't have the time to bring each player's contribution in detail.
We appreciate you watching this presentation. We hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, this is Bob Rondo.
And this is Bruce King saying thanks and so long.
I enjoyed my 4 years at Washington a lot, and I appreciate all the fan support, and you know, keep supporting the Dogs.
To the alumni and other people out there that this is a great institution, and the football program has really been great over the years, and just keep the support of all of us.
Mm-hmm. You still have people coming up and say, hey, aren't you Charlie Mitchell? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If they're over 40.
I'm not there yet. Did you play hurt very much? Or besides all the time?
Just on Saturdays.
The players that decided to come to Washington during the years, the coaching staff, Tom Tibbs, Chesty Walker, and the other coaches that were here as assistants, I can't say enough for them, because they made the program. You have to have those kind of people, and I'm really proud of the performances at the time they were here, and then being in the business or professional world today, and follow them and their fortunes with their families. Some of them are grandfathers now.
He's having to explain things to you, Don. It's like, he used to call 28. He used to call 28, and I'd say, what's that play?
That's where you get the ball and go around in, Don.
You get that ball, don't you know? I probably missed a lot of those calls.
Well, see, 28. 8 was way out there.
Yeah.
Well, it ended up always being 22 as far as Don was concerned.
The university experience was just a great experience for me, and I appreciate, you know, having had it.
As I look back on those years, I feel very privileged, and I have a sense of almost destiny in the fact that it was the right chemistry, the right part in a group of guys who played over their heads constantly, and we were very fortunate. And I look back and I see those years as just I was very blessed, you know, and I have to give God credit for putting me in the right place at the right time. There's no other way to explain it.
Well, it's been a great ride. I think when you can stay 16 years in a job, this kind of job, I think that says a lot for your support. I think it says a lot for your coaches that have helped you coach, and for the administration, and also for the athletes, because the program is here for the athletes, the players, and they're the ones that have gone out there and made every tackle and every assist and every throw and every catch, and I haven't made one.